Welcome to The Jewish World, the show that discusses the week's most pressing issues facing the Jewish state, the Jewish people, and the global Jewish community. This past week, Jews around the world commemorated Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of the Hebrew month Av. It's considered the saddest day on the Jewish calendar. It's the culmination of a 3-week period during which Jews marked the destruction of the holy temples in Jerusalem, both destroyed on this date. The first temple was burned by the Babylonians in 423 BCE, and the second temple destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE. More than that, this day has marked many more tragedies for the Jewish people throughout history, including the 1290 expulsion of England's Jews and in 1492 the expulsion of all Jews from Spain. As such, for Jews around the world, this marks a solemn day, a day of fasting as well as a day of prayer, where many Jews wish to return to the Temple Mount, the site of the first two temples. But this year, the Jewish Day of Mourning also coincided with an Islamic holiday, Eid al-Adha, commemorating the end of the annual Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca. And as such, police in Israel initially barred non-Muslims from entering the Temple Mount, where tens of thousands of Muslim worshippers arrived in the morning. But then, after another security assessment, Jewish visitors were allowed to enter the site, with only several dozen visiting under close police escort. Muslim worshippers, however, began throwing chairs and other objects at the group, leading the Jewish visitors to leave the compound shortly after. According to police, Muslim worshippers then began rioting and making nationalistic calls, which led forces on the ground to fire tear gas, rubber bullets, and other less lethal riot control weapons at the protesters. And of course, Israeli politicians on the right have criticized the closure of the Temple Mount to Jewish visitors, blaming Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for the move. Just for comparison, last year, a record number of Jews were reported to have visited the Temple Mount for Tisha B'Av, causing backlash from the Palestinian Authority and Jordan, which managed the holy site through the Waqf. But despite the religious tensions and controversy, Jewish worshippers remained unfazed, instead visiting the Western Wall, the closest spot to the old temple where Jews can pray. As we reported last week, one of the largest ever delegations of Democrat and Republican congressmen and women visited Israel this past week. And while they don't agree on much these days, there's one thing that they can come together on. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib should visit Israel.
Thank you. Thank you.
Speaking at a joint press conference in Jerusalem, a bipartisan congressional delegation said the two lawmakers would come out of their trip better informed about the country and its security concerns. Republican leader Kevin McCarthy of California added that anyone with an opinion about Israel should see it with their own eyes and come with an open mind. In doing so, he argued, would highlight the unbreakable bond between the U.S. and Israel. McCarthy, together with House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, led the 72-person delegation of freshman lawmakers visiting the country last week as part of an AIPAC-sponsored tour, which takes place every non-election year. But the sheer size of this group is rare. After all, in 2013, 37 Democrats came to Israel, and in 2015, only 21 came to the Holy Land. As part of their trip, the lawmakers toured the country, visited security sites as well as historic sites, and met with leading officials, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who told them that Israel is currently in the midst of revolutionary times. Netanyahu cited the country's 300 new agreements over the past 3 years with other countries.
Now this is Israel, tiny Israel, okay? These are the agreements and contracts we've made in 1 year alone, 2018, with countries around the world. The blue ones are the new agreements that we've made. And you can see all the great powers of Asia, Muslim states like Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan, India, China, Japan, Australia, you name it, all of them, okay? Russia. I've been to Africa 4 times in 2 years. 4 times in 2 years. Does that tell you something? If somebody says to you, I hate to fly, but they fly all the time, you know they're lying.
Now, with regards to Omar and Tlaib, who are not part of the group, they are expected to visit the country later this month on what they've deemed a counter-AIPAC tour. The two have been outspoken against Israel since their first day in office and both support the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Although critics of Omar and Tlaib predict that the two will only use their visit to fuel their criticism of the Jewish state, Hoyer thinks it is possible for them to come away with a more balanced view of the country. He added that the two women are very bright and want to learn. As for McCarthy, he dismissed earlier reports that U.S. President Donald Trump suggested that Israel ban the two from entering the country. That's not to say there haven't been those in favor of preventing the two from coming into Israel. Some Israeli politicians and the NGO Shuat Hadin all advocated for Israel to bar entry to the lawmakers. Israel's ambassador to the U.S., Ron Dermer, though, quickly negated the idea, saying that Israel would not bar two sitting U.S. lawmakers from entering the country. The University of Indianapolis has launched an investigation after two Israeli sisters found swastikas drawn inside their dorm room. Michal and Shira Sasson had just arrived on campus for the fall semester when they discovered two swastikas painted on the wall in their room at Roberts Hall. The sisters have been attending the private university for the past 2 years and both play basketball for the college. They say that they are saddened and angered by this act of hate and bigotry. The university has promised to crack down on anti-Semitism on campus. Their probe will include tracking down everyone who rented campus housing over the summer or had access to the sisters' rooms. This latest incident, sadly, isn't new. There has been an increase of anti-Semitism, not to mention support for the BDS movement, on campuses across the U.S. And according to the Anti-Defamation League's latest report, anti-Semitic assaults have doubled in 2018, with a record total of 1,879 attacks against Jews and Jewish institutions across the country. This is the third highest year on record since ADL started tracking such data in the 1970s. The California Legislative Jewish Caucus is livid over the state's latest proposed curriculum. 16 legislators on the board, all of them Democrats, said they're strongly opposed to the current draft of the ethnic studies model curriculum as it currently stands. And they issued their objections to this in a lengthy 8-page letter to the Instructional Quality Commission. The entire saga began in 2016 when the state's Board of Education set out to create a curriculum that would spotlight contributions of minorities in both California and America in general. That model is now up for review and was supposed to pass by next year. Now, the new curriculum was set to focus on African American studies, Hispanic studies, Native American studies, and Asian American studies, with the hope that it will create a more inclusive educational environment for people of color. But it's not only conservatives that are upset with how the curriculum has been presented. The LA Times wrote a scathing editorial accusing the curriculum of engaging in groupthink. And Jewish groups in particular have objected to the curriculum's one-sided handling of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Specifically, the Jewish Caucus said the BDS section offers only a single viewpoint of a complex geopolitical situation and is riddled with inaccuracies. The curriculum also completely ignores the contributions of Jews, which only further lays credence to the claim that the program is anti-Semitic. In fact, no Jewish or Israeli perspective is provided at all, even though Palestinians are represented in the curriculum. And the Jewish Public Affairs Committee of California lamented that by omitting Jews, the curriculum misses its initial purpose, highlighting the diversity of the multi-ethnic state. Israel is known for having created some of the world's most innovative inventions: the USB drive, the smallest tomato, and drip irrigation, and also the tiniest Bible on earth, the Nano Bible. But here's what's more exciting. That tiny Bible can now be worn around your neck in a groundbreaking line of jewelry. Joining us now to tell us all about this is ILTV's Nittany Manson. Nittany, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Lidar. Yes, so as you said, an Israeli jewelry company has actually teamed up with Tel Aviv University to create jewelry that is just so fitting for the Holy Land. They've actually found a way to combine religion and technology in a really beautiful way. They've created micro-sized versions of the Holy Book that can be embedded into a pendant and then worn as jewelry.
And can you tell us a little bit about who's behind this creative initiative? Who started this?
Well, it's actually a family, a mother and daughter, who started this jewelry brand. Their family has been in the diamond and jewelry business for a few generations already. And so when this daughter was studying at Tel Aviv University, she was actually introduced to nanotechnology. From there, the duo teamed up with the Tel Aviv University Center for Nanoscience and Nanotechnology to create these mini Bibles.
So tell us a little bit about the jewelry itself. Is this the whole Bible in the pendant, or are there just different kinds?
Well, every chip has the whole 929 chapters of the Jewish Bible, which is around 1.2 million letters.
And it's incredible that all of this fits onto a necklace.
Yeah, it's really futuristic stuff here. They offer a bunch of different designs that you can get, necklaces, bracelets, rings, you name it. And the nice thing is that they all contain the whole Bible. The pricing just depends on what kind of piece or material it is. It can cost you anywhere from around $80 to $4,000. The technology is the same for each piece, but of course a gold necklace would be more expensive than, say, a smaller piece made from a cheaper metal.
And there was, of course, the Nano Bible created by the Technion, the Israel Institute of Technology, right? Is this similar to that?
Well, actually, this Nano Bible jewelry is a twist on that first Nano Bible, which was created in 2015 and is now displayed as part of an exhibit to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Shrine of the Book Wing of the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. But this is the first time that it's actually been made into a wearable piece of jewelry, which is what makes this so special.
Indeed. And so where can our viewers get one of these pieces?
So right now, the Tanor jewelry line is being sold in select museums like the Bible Museum in Washington, D.C. and the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. But items can also be bought through the company's website or at duty-free on board El Al Airlines flights.
All right, so for those interested at home, don't forget to check out their website. And I think I might want one of these for myself. Nitni, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Lidar.
For the first time ever, drawings and text by famed Jewish writer Franz Kafka have been presented in Jerusalem. After being locked in a Swiss vault for years, the public is finally able to enjoy the rare sight at Israel's National Library. The texts themselves were never actually published, meaning they may not pose great literary significance. But for those who are big fans of the esteemed writer, it's an opportunity to get a little more insight into Kafka's writing process. The latest texts are just part of the library's collection containing hundreds of letters, manuscripts, and journals by Kafka and his literary executor, Max Brod. So what took so long to release these documents? Well, a bitter legal battle between German libraries and the estate of Brod's secretary, Esther Hoff, finally came to a close. The legal dispute began when Hoff decided to hold on to the texts despite Brod's wishes to release them to the National Library. The library finally won the court case but spent years trying to figure out where all the documents were, since many of them were scattered across Europe. And now the library has finally obtained the last batch of writings from a USBC vault in Switzerland. Given that these texts often mention Kafka's thoughts on Zionism and Judaism, it seems fitting that they finally made their way home to the National Library in Jerusalem. Israeli elections are just around the corner as Israelis will head to the polls on September 17th. And a lot has happened over the course of the past few weeks in Israeli politics as new coalitions came together and others simply failed to form. Lots of questions remain as Israelis will head to the polls for the second time this election cycle, a first in the country's history. Of course, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is hoping to stay in power after having made history as the longest-serving Israeli PM. But will he be able to stay on for another term? And here to make sense of all the newly formed coalitions, the major political players, and what we can expect to see until the elections is former Knesset member for Yesh Atid and Senior Manager, Community Outreach for Honest Reporting, Rabbi Dov Liebman. Welcome.
Thank you, Lidar. Good to be with you.
So it's been a crazy few weeks. What can you tell us about how the political parties are shaping up, who the major coalitions are, and who the major players are?
It's really fascinating. We've seen essentially two mergers on the right side of the political map and two mergers on the left side of the political map. On the right side, Prime Minister Netanyahu, in an attempt to strengthen the Likud party, joined together with Finance Minister Moshe Kahlon and the Kulanu party, and the goal was to gain the party more seats. We have not really seen any major result in the positive for the Prime Minister from that merger. But the one merger on the right, which is very significant, is the combination of the Jewish Home Party together with the New Right Party, led by Ayelet Shaked and Naftali Bennett. That is a party that fell short of getting into the Knesset in the April elections, taking essentially 4 seats away from the right wing that didn't go anywhere, and that prevented Netanyahu from forming a coalition. They are now running together. They're polling anywhere from 10 to 12 seats, solidifying a significant number of right-wing seats that did not enter the Knesset last time. That's two mergers on the right side of the map. On the left side of the map, you have the Labor Party led by Amir Peretz, that joined together with someone from the right wing, actually, which is quite startling. Orly Levy Abukassis from Yisrael Beitenu, Avigdor Lieberman's party, the Gesher party. They've joined together to focus on social issues, and they seem to be polling pretty well in terms of getting into the Knesset. And then the other major merger on the left side of the map was Meretz, the far left-wing party, together with Stav Shafir from Labor and former Labor Prime Minister Ehud Barak, all have joined together into what they call the Democratic camp. So we essentially have a merger on the far left of the map, a merger on the far right of the map, and then two smaller mergers towards the center-right, center-left. Fascinating developments as we head towards the September election.
So a lot of reshuffling going on. Now, let's remind our viewers why we had to go to a second round of elections in the first place.
Really difficult sometimes for people outside of Israel to completely understand. But after the elections are over in Israel, there's no winner. You have the seats divided based on the percentage of vote that each party got. Nobody votes for a prime minister. After the election, the president of Israel calls all the parties together one by one, and they suggest who do they think should form the next government. Forming a government means someone who has to bring together 61 seats, a majority of the 120 seats in the Knesset, and then that person who gets the most advice, so to speak, suggestions, he goes or she goes and tries to form a government. Prime Minister Netanyahu was given the most mandates and suggested to form a government. But when it came down to piecing together the ability to bring 61 mandates, he had a stalemate between the religious parties on the one side and Avigdor Lieberman on the other side, who were fighting against each other about religion and state issues and the draft of the ultra-Orthodox. And that left the prime minister one mandate short of being able to form a government. And the prime minister pulled a fast one. He could have gone back to the president and said, I couldn't do it. And the president would go to someone else, presumably Benny Gantz, the leader of the other large party, Blue and White, and give him a chance to form a government. But instead of doing that, the prime minister called a vote in the Knesset to disband the Knesset. He got a majority of votes to do that, and that has put us in a position where we're heading towards new elections. And the key point, Lidar, and to everyone watching is, what will happen after the September election? Will we be in a similar situation of a stalemate when no one can form a government, and what will happen then?
Well, that is the question. And so what's different this election cycle than the previous one?
The one thing which I can tell you is, on the one hand, looking at the polls, we are still in an absolute stalemate. The prime minister does not get to 61 seats. Benny Gantz would not get to 61 seats. So just looking at the polling results right now, there is no path to 61. What's different is a commitment from pretty much every single party that we will not go to elections again. What do we mean by that? If we have a situation where no one has 61, you're going to see all kinds of movements towards unity government. So, for example, Netanyahu might reach out to the chairman of the Labor Party, Amir Peretz, and say, we're in an emergency situation. I need you to join this government and help us get to 61. We don't want to go in new elections. He'll offer him all kinds of portfolios that give him the finance ministry and the welfare ministry, ministries he would want to advance his agenda, and perhaps he would join together. Another possibility is Benny Gantz and Netanyahu finding some way to come together, find a way towards a unity government, or there is one other option. And that other option is Blue and White, led by Benny Gantz, as the anti-Netanyahu. They say we won't sit with someone who has all these corruption charges. But we're not against sitting with the Likud party. So perhaps someone else in the Likud party could emerge as one to form a government. Does not have to be the leader of the party, and then they could work together with Blue and White and form a unity government. So there's going to be a lot of speculation leading up to September 17th when the election comes, but what really is going to determine what happens in our future is what happens after those elections. I'll just mention one other point, Lidar, which is very critical, and that is on the right wing, there are two parties, one led by Moshe Feiglin and one led by Itamar Ben-Gvir, that at the moment do not pass the threshold to get into the Knesset. They together represent 4 mandates on the right wing, which could be all Netanyahu needs to form a narrow right-wing government. There's all kinds of efforts for them not to run and perhaps give their support to existing right-wing parties that will join. That could perhaps give Netanyahu what he needs to form a narrow right-wing government.
All right, so we're going to be following this very closely, and hopefully we'll have another update soon in the coming weeks. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
My pleasure.
And on on a positive note. There is nothing more life-affirming than to see a Holocaust survivor, having suffered so much, celebrating life along with her offspring, a testament to the resilience of the Jewish people. And Holocaust survivor Shoshana Ovitz decided to do just that to mark her 104th birthday in a very unique way. She requested that all of her children, grandchildren, and descendants come together to celebrate her special day at the Western Wall. And as you might imagine, they were more than happy to oblige. It was a sight to see as about 400 members of Ovitz's family flocked to the holy site in Jerusalem. Of course, it wasn't easy organizing such a big family get-together. The whole family had to send out emails, messages, and make phone calls, even across the world. 104-year-old Shoshana Ovitz survived Auschwitz and was separated from her mother there, who was eventually killed by Joseph Mengele. Shoshana met her husband while the two were searching for surviving relatives after the Holocaust, and finally married when she was in her early 30s. They lived in a transit camp in Austria where their first daughter was born, before they moved to Haifa and had 2 more sons and another daughter. Decades later, they have hundreds of descendants. Happy birthday, Shoshana. And on that note, that's all the time we have for this week's show. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us and all of you, our viewers, for tuning in. And we'd love to hear from you if you have any stories, whether about anti-Semitism, BDS, or any positive events going on in your Jewish community. You can reach out to us on Facebook at Israel English News, or just give us a like. You can also reach out on Twitter at ILTV News and on our website at iltv.tv. I'm Ladar Gavelazi. Thanks for watching.